Hi there. Well, my name is Davey. I have been kind of everything. I've been an atheist. I've been agnostic. I've flirted with New Age belief systems, and now ultimately I consider myself to be a Christian, and I do accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I've never been happier at this point in my life, or more satisfied in who I am, or in my spiritual fulfillment or journey. So it's taken a long time to get here. I'm 29 years old, but I spent my early life, beginning of my life as a young child as a Christian, but honestly not really. I loosely believed in the idea of God, but my parents didn't. They're I, I kind of joke with my parents. I tell them that they kind of look at uh, Christianity as fire insurance, right? They just kind of like, well, just in case, right? Just in case God's real, I'll just kind of throw my hat in the ring, just so I don't end up on the losing side, right? And so I was kind of raised that way. Like, Christianity was loosely in the home. I don't even know if we had a Bible, but my parents were vaguely Christian. But I had an aunt who's a very devout Christian, and she would always try to push biblical teachings on me, especially when I was growing up. And she advocated for my parents to put me into an evangelical kindergarten school when I was 4 years old, and so I did that for my own, in kindergarten. I was immersed in that ecosystem, and I would go to church. I used to go to Cornerstone Church because I'm here in San Antonio, Texas, and Cornerstone's it's a very famous church. It's very well known. It's a mega church by Pastor John Hagee. So I would go to his church as a child, but my mother became very disillusioned with his teachings. My mother's a very liberal woman. My father's very liberal as well, but my mother in particular is an extremely liberal woman, and you could tell that these teachings um, that were coming forth in the sermons were against her personal values. She considered herself kind of a progressive, like a live and let live. If people want to be gay, they should be gay. If two men want to get married, they should get married. We should be able to live our lives however we want, as long as we're good people, right? And so she looked at things that way. And Pastor John Hagee was very much not that way. You know, he was very strict when it came to uh, particular biblical laws, right? And it rubbed her the wrong way. And so she right away, after I was done with kindergarten, she pulled me out of the school, out of the Christian school. And then I was just kind of in secular public school for the rest of my upbringing. And so my parents never really gave me a good Christian background. And as my mother got older, she actually began to kind of resent God. She believed that God was real, but um, she she felt like God didn't favor her, and she almost had kind of a resentment, or a bitterness towards God and the idea of God. But I was a child, and so I continued loosely believing in the idea of God. And then when I was reaching puberty, you know, as a lot of kids do, I began to change quite a bit. Not only in my appearance, which did, right. That's when the long hair and everything came in, but but the way I thought, right. I started to ask a lot of the big questions of who am I, what do I want, and what is life all about? Is God real? Why the Christian God? Why not the Buddhist God? Why not Allah? Right? Why not all these other? Why not any of these pagan gods? And so I so my mind started going in this direction. Well, okay, I still believe in God, but maybe it's not the Christian God. Like, who's to say? And especially since I wasn't raised with a strong Christian background, and no one was really around to reinforce why the Christian God was preeminent. Um, I didn't really have any reason for that. Other than it was kind of pushed on me, and I was naturally pretty rebellious. So whenever people tried to push things on me, I wanted to go the other direction. So I thought, okay, well, I believe in God, but maybe all these different religions are all talking about the same God, right? So why pick a religion? And so I went there. I went from why the Christian God to why not all these different gods. And then as I started to get older, I started to think, well, why need a God at all? Why can't things just be? Like, do we necessarily need some sort of transcendental entity to be responsible for any of these any material happenings? Perhaps everything is just random happenstance, right? Because when I go to school, there's no mention of God and what we study or what we talk about. It's everything is very material. It's all matter. It's all scientific. And now perhaps religion is just an old, outdated, superstitious understanding of the way the world was created, and perhaps due to our scientific rational enlightenment, we don't need these we don't need these outdated belief systems any longer. And so I was kind of there, and then I went from there to being and at this point I'll consider myself kind of like a soft atheist, like an agnostic soft atheist. Like I wasn't like full on like God is not real for sure, but like God may or may not be real, and probably not. And so I went from there to actually being kind of hostile towards Christianity, because I had a lot of uh, atheist and agnostic teachers in school, and I was surrounded by a lot of people who are agnostic and atheists, and they would present a lot of the horrific things that were done in the name of God, like the Inquisition and the Crusades, and it it seemed to me that religion and Christianity had been used for a long period of time as a system of control for nation states and governmental agencies and other groups to exert control and power over people. And when this started to become when I started to understand this history, I became kind of resentful towards the idea of Christianity. So I was actually kind of hostile towards the idea of Christianity and of God. And so this defined the my late teen years, and then into my early 20s. And so because I adopted this type of mindset, I started to attract like-minded people. And it turns out that like-minded people tend to be far left people, right? People who are on the far left tend to be they tend to be atheists, and they tend to resent the idea of God, and they think God is kind of synonymous. Like if you say you believe in God, you're practically saying I'm stupid, in these circles. Like if you're in academia, if you're in a college campus that isn't particularly Christian, which are very rare, right? That's quite rare. But most universities are quite secular and outwardly hostile to religion. So if you say I believe in God, you're basically saying I'm stupid. And if you say I don't believe in God, you're basically saying I'm woke and smart, right? It's kind of like an IQ test, so so to speak. So I was I start I was in college for a couple years, but I ended up dropping out and walking my own path. But while I was in college, I surrounded myself with a lot of these ways of thinking, right? These people who had these far left ideologies, and it was very secular and atheistic, right? It was kind of this idea that um, institutions like religion and other things like corporate or banking institutions and all these things were responsible for all of the the oppressed and the oppressors in the world, right? The reason why there was so much economic disparity, the reason why there was so much suffering and so much strife in the world was because there was an oppressor class who it was exerting power over the oppressed. And it was kind of this utopian idea, right? That God doesn't exist. And so we need to do our best to create a utopia here on earth. And the way we do that is by leveling the playing field and by getting rid of the oppressors, right? The 1% in all or on all areas, right? And if we could just get rid of those oppressors, then we could remake the world into a utopian image. And so I was really into this for a while, and this is um, uh, but while I was going through this, right? a part of me was never fully atheist. Like I would still I still kind of believe that there was something, because I a lot of events just happened to unfold in my life that just were very inexplicable. Like I was in a couple of car accidents that were really horrendous, where I should have been hurt. Like I should have been, it made no sense that I wasn't badly hurt. Like the whole car was totaled. Right. I had a friend who was I was asleep in the passenger seat, and I had a friend who was driving, and he was drunk, and we crashed, and we should have been really, really hurt. We should have been really hurt, and by the grace of God, we're completely unscathed. And I couldn't help but feel this something in here, this force, like something was protecting me. And so, despite this agnosticism and these other beliefs I started to adopt, I couldn't shake the idea that something was out there, and so I would have experiences like this. And so, even though I wasn't a Christian anymore, I believe that there was probably something, but it probably just wasn't Christianity. And so that's when I started getting into more New Age belief systems. I started playing. I was never like fully there, but it was very popular. Like if you're in academia, and if you're young, a young millennial, and you're in this camp of people, then you're not allowed to be Christian. Like people are outwardly hostile to Christians. But if you're atheist, that's okay. That just means you're really smart. But if you believe in spirits or God or anything like that, then you have to be in the New Age camp, right? Like you have to do tarot cards and believe in meditation and chakras, and this kind of like Eastern style New Age belief system. Or maybe you're like a pagan, or you're in a Wicca or something. Like that's okay. That's okay as long as it's not Christianity, right? So I flirted with these belief systems because as I got older, it became more and more apparent that there was some underlying spiritual reality that it was undeniable. It became more and more undeniable the older I got. But so it started to create more and more dissonance in me, because the political ideologies I started to adopt were kind of out of line of anything like that existing. But I couldn't deny something like that was real. And so I would always pray, like at night when I woke up, before meals. Like I couldn't help it. Like I just felt compelled to pray, because I was really grateful for a lot of the things that had happened to me in my life. I felt extremely blessed and lucky, but I was almost kind of ashamed to pray. So I never told anybody about it, and I would kind of do it in secret. And like, it's like in my 20s, like I started to develop like a spiritual connection to something, right? Like I started to believe that God was real just by existing, right? Just by being alive, just by looking at all that is. Like I started looking at the divine order that made everything what it was. The idea of things being a random happenstance started to make less and less sense to me. And so this started to take shape. Like it started to mature. There was like a spiritual maturation that was just naturally going on. Kind of like when you're going through puberty and your body's naturally starting to grow and mature. Like that spiritual aspect of me was just naturally. I didn't really even have to do anything. Like it was just naturally kind of growing and maturing and evolving inside of me. And but I was still involved in academia and these far left belief systems. But I ended up dropping out of school, and college just wasn't for me. I was someone who wanted to walk my own path, and it didn't make sense to me to get into tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And when I wanted to do tons of things with my life, like I don't want to just do one thing forever and then spend 7 years just paying off the debt that it took to even get here. I wanted to do something else. And so I got out of academia, and so I wasn't as involved with these like far left political groups anymore that would completely dominate academia, especially in America. I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but it's certainly the case in America. But when I started looking at things from a more outside perspective, I started to realize that these these people they don't really love the poor. They just hate the rich. Like I started to see that a lot of these people were just very resentful They're very bitter. They 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 resent the fact that there's a group of people who work exceptionally hard, for 100 hours a week every day, and those people naturally get to the top, right? And I felt that Western society and civilization was fundamentally good at its core, because people who are the smartest and the hardest working tend to get to the top. And that's what you would want in your society, right? You would want the hardest working, smartest people to be the ones who run things. And for the most part, that tends to be the case. And I started to see that these people are very they're very pro censorship. They're ready to call anything that goes against their line of thinking hate speech. They're ready to label anyone an ist or a phobe, if you disagree with them, and it was very toxic. I noticed how toxic it was, and then I started examining their outright hostility towards Christianity, and I thought it was really funny because if you're anti-Jewish, right? They have a word for that. You're an anti-Semite. If you're antagonistic towards Muslims, there's a word for that, right? You're an Islamophobe. But if you're antagonistic towards Christians, there's no word for that, right? I thought that was strange that uh, just the antagonism, the hostility towards Christianity was so allowed. Well, it was all right. In fact, it was kind of cool. Like if you're anti-Christian, that, like I said, just meant you were smart and woke, and you were with it, right? You just understand that science has replaced these superstitious belief systems, unless you're a Muslim or atheist. I mean, or unless you're Muslim or New Age, then it's okay. I don't know. It it started to make less and less sense the further I went. I started observing this, and during this time, I've always been very fascinated by psychology, and so I started to read books by Carl Jung, and I started to listen to lectures by Jordan Peterson, and I thought they were all very fascinating, and it really resonated with me. And I noticed that they both had a lot of reverence for the Bible, and I thought that was really interesting because they're very brilliant men. They're both brilliant men, and they're academics, right? And they're psychologists, but they're not far left thinkers, right? Which is weird because you don't really find that anymore. It's quite rare. And they both had a lot of reverence for the Bible, and they would talk about biblical teachings, and they would talk about the reality of Christ, and even the possibility of the coming of the Antichrist, and the power of the Word, and how God created the world with the Word. I was like, wow, like these men who are supposed to be left wing secular academics are talking about God, and so it kind of rekindled my interest in the Bible. And I thought, well, I believe in something. I know I believe in something. I don't believe everything is just random. I'm not a nihilist. I believe everything. I believe life is full of meaning, and life is innately profound and beautiful. And I don't think that like an atheist or a nihilist would think that the universe is just kind of a soulless automaton just meant to grind us apart limb from limb. Because a lot of these atheists, they're very unhappy people. They're very depressed, they're very anxious, they have all of these emotional issues. And I've noticed that a lot of the people who had divorced themselves more and more from the idea of God tend to be angrier and more lost and more prone to depression. And online, they would share memes, right, that were full of darkness and doom and meaninglessness, right? They would kind of make fun of the fact of that life is like meaningless and nothing matters. And that never made sense to me. I always believed that life was innately meaningful and what we do here matters. But I never glued Christianity to this idea. Like I didn't realize I was kind in a way I was kind of already a Christian. I just didn't really know. And I started reading the Bible like after renewing my interest by reading Carl Jung and listening to Jordan Peterson. And I started reading the Bible, and I just started reading Genesis, and the words kind of just they spoke beyond the page to me. Like it resonated with me in a way other texts hadn't. Like I had flirted with other religious texts. Like I've read the Tao Te Ching, I've read parts of the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Bhagavad Gita. I've read books on Wicca and astrology and all this stuff, right? I even read a book by Aleister Crowley, like when I was like 23 or something like that. So I was always fascinated by mysticism and spirituality, but it was all interesting to me. But it wasn't until I read the Bible, because I'd never really read the Bible in my youth. Like it was just around, and when I was a kid, I was never encouraged to read it or learn anything from it, except in kindergarten. Then after that, it was outside of my life. And then when I started growing up, Christianity was like evil. Like it was considered like taboo. Like I was antagonistic towards it. So of course I wouldn't read the Bible. So it wasn't until at this point in my life, in like my mid 20s, when I started to actually read the Bible and to examine its word, and immediately it resonated with me. And when I was reading Genesis, I, I I started looking at the idea of the origin of man and the idea of original sin, and this actually made a lot of sense to me. It made a lot more sense to me than the way I used to look at things, because the way I used to look at things is that this kind of Rousseauian idea, like this left wing Rousseauian idea of that man is already innately good and perfect, and that it's society that makes man evil, right? Because man is innately good. So if we just change society, right? If we just remake society to be conducive to a utopia, then everything will fall into place, right? We just have to remove these evil oppressor groups that are keeping us down. And if we can just get rid of that and replace it with empathetic and compassionate systems that are for the good of man, then everything will fall into place. And that's the way I used to look at things. But that's not the way the Bible looks at things. And the way the Bible looks at things is that life is full of suffering innately. Ever since the fall of man, man has had to eternally wrestle with good and evil for the entirety of our existence. And suffering is innate, struggling is innate. You'll never escape it. There will always be tragedy, there will always be hardship, there will always be the threat of evil lurking in the world as long as we live in this world as it stands until Jesus comes. And as long as we live in the world as it stands, there will always be hardship and evil and suffering and struggle and strife and pain. And you cannot escape that. That is an inescapable fact that is ingrained in the reality that we inhabit. That is a real thing, and you cannot escape. And so the best thing that you can do is to work hard, to carry a heavy load, and to glorify God, to show that you've wrestled with evil and you've chosen good. You've chosen good, knowing full well that there's a war waging in your heart between good and evil, because you've been tainted by sin. And so that lurks in you. But you've chosen good. You've worked for good. And you've chosen to live a life in accordance with God when you could have chosen otherwise, right? Because that's a constant looming threat. And no matter what you do to the world, no matter how you shape it, that threat of evil will always be lurking. And you can never create a utopia because it doesn't exist. It's a paradox. It's not something that could ever be because of the nature of man, and that's just the way things are. And that made a lot more sense to me. The idea of not removing suffering, not removing strife, but learning to live with it and to bear it with nobility. That seemed much more in line with nature and reality to me, and so that immediately just resonated with me. And then I started reading more in the story of Cain and Abel, and the story of Cain and Abel. It reminded me of my old left wing friends, right? Because it's a story of sacrifice, and in that story, Cain and Abel are both giving sacrificial offerings to God. However, Abel is doing things the right way, right? He's offering the best of what he has, and God accepts his sacrifice. And Cain is not giving his either offering the best of what he has, or he's not giving his offerings in a way that's in line with God, right? He's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, and so God rejects his sacrifice. And Cain is immediately very angry about this, right? He's angry. He's like, he's he's angry that God would, would reject his sacrifice, almost like reality itself was turning its back on him. And God tells him that sin lurks at the door like a predatory cat, and you've let it in. Basically, and this is the last thing that Cain wants to hear, right? He's basically saying that this is your fault. Your fault. You did not have to give me an unworthy sacrifice. You know exactly how this works. You could have done like Abel did, right? You could have given the best of what you had. You could have worked hard. You could have bared your suffering with nobility like Cable. You could have worked hard and toiled and given me the best and offered me the best of what you had. But you chose not to, right? You chose sin. You chose not to give me a worthy sacrifice. And so I reject it. I'm sorry, but that's reality. That's the way things are, and you can't escape that. So it's up to you to better yourself, right? And of course, that's not what Cain wants to hear. Uh, Cain would rather just have his sacrifice accepted no matter what. He doesn't want to play by the rules, right? He doesn't want to honor God's law. He just wants things his way, and God doesn't let it happen. God doesn't let it fly, and that makes Cain angry. Wroth, right? That's the word that's used. And so Cain, instead of deciding to better himself, work harder, and to offer a worthier sacrifice, Cain wished he wanted to be like Abel, right? He wanted to be the favored son off, with accepted sacrifices. And instead of working to become Abel, right, which he could have, he decides to destroy his own ideal and kill Abel, right? He decides to kill him. Instead of trying to be more like him, he decides to destroy him. And, you know, God asks him, where's Abel? Where's my favorite son? And then Cain basically says he kills him. And he famously asks him, "Am I my brother's keeper?" I'd imagine kind of smugly, right? And the answer is yes. For anyone listening to this, the answer is yes. Yes, you are your brother's keeper. The answer is very much yes. But this story, it really reminded me of a lot of these people I used to hang around, because a lot of these people, they're in the doldrums, right? They're poor, they're unhappy, they're anxious, they're uh, they're unsuccessful in their romantic relationships, they're unsuccessful in their career, they're unsuccessful in all these different aspects of their life. And instead of trying to work hard and to sacrifice and to be better, they'd rather destroy the people who have gotten there. They'd rather demonize the people who have achieved what they wish they had achieved, and that makes them bitter, and that makes them angry, and they remind me of Cain. And so I read this story, and immediately I was like, this is a profound book. This isn't just an old superstitious book of fairy tales, like I've been told for most of my life. This is actually a profound text with thousands of years of not only human wisdom, but divine wisdom. Because word like this could not have purely come from man, right? This is something that's beyond. It felt beyond. And so I immediately became attracted to the Bible, and I began to study the Bible. And the more I did, the more sense it made to me. And I and the more rational sense believing in God just became to me, because I started thinking about, atheism and all these things I used to be allied with. And well, to me, it takes a greater leap of faith to not believe in God than it does to believe in God, right? If you just look at the laws of causality, right, that everything that happens has to have a cause, right? Like if I have a glass here, and then my glass makes a sound, it was caused by me tapping my finger. And me tapping my finger was caused by my thought, and my thought was caused by the conversation that I was just having, right? So like everything that happens has a cause. And so if everything that happens has a cause, then the universe was created, right? Even scientists and atheists are here now. The universe started. It hasn't always been, because it has a finite amount of energy. And if the universe has always been, then it would have run out of energy by now, right? So There was a point where it all started, and if everything that happens has a cause, something had to have caused the creation of the universe and all that is, right? But for something as all encompassing as the universe, as reality, right, as everything, then this must have been caused by some all powerful, timeless being, right? That's the only explanation to me. That's the only way any of this makes sense. Because there's another mystic I used to, because he's a New Age guy, and so I don't really follow him anymore. But he did have this quote I do really like. He used to say that atheists love to. They say that give me one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. And I always thought that was really punchy, because that's so true. The atheists are saying, just give us this one free miracle, just one free miracle of how everything came into being, how everything got set into motion, how the Big Bang even happened, where any of this came from. Just give us that one free miracle, and then we'll explain how the laws of physics and gravity, and we'll explain all that. Don't worry about it. We'll explain all that, but just give us that one free miracle. But you can't escape that. You can't escape that. That's a big deal, like the origin of things. And so to me, it makes a lot more rational sense, even from just like an Enlightenment era, Western style, weighing and sifting style approach, right? Like outside of just mysticism and faith, it just makes rational sense to me that God is real. And so I it all started coming together for me. Like it all just started fitting in. Like my old sense of being protected, my innate desire to pray, the profundity of the scripture in the Bible, the rationality of, like, I start to rationalize God, and it all started to click and make sense. And then I started to get sick. Then I started to get really sick. I started to get sick with autoimmune disorder. And I didn't know that at the time. I just knew I was sick. I was dealing with heart palpitations and chest pressure, and it was bad. I had no idea what it was. And at the time, I was working out. Like I was pretty fit. I had a six pack. I had pretty decent sized arms. I was lean, muscular. You know, I was a fit young guy, and I was getting like chest pressure. I felt like I was having heart attacks. I could hardly breathe when I would get these episodes. Like it made no sense to me. Like I was like the last person on earth, right, who should be having health issues like this. So right whenever this was happening, I happened to just so happen, right, Providence. I just so happened to meet this girl named Sarah Ballard, and I I got into a very quickly into a very serious romantic relationship. We loved each other very deeply, very fast, very passionate, intense. And she just so happens to be the daughter of Mercy Ballard. And Mercy Ballard happens to be maybe the most profound healer I've ever known. And she just so happens to specialize in autoimmune disorders. And just by talking to Mercy through Sarah, I started to realize what I had was almost certainly an autoimmune disorder, because I had my gallbladder removed when I was a teenager, because I didn't know how to eat. I would eat ramen noodles all the time, and then I lost a lot of weight in a short amount of time. It gave me gallstones, and I had to remove it. But ever since then, I haven't been able to digest food very well, especially fats and carbohydrates. So as I've been eating all these foods that I'm not supposed to be eating because no one ever told me, then I've just been accumulating damage to my gut over time. And eventually, this got so bad to where my immune system started to malfunction, because most of your immune cells are come from your gut. A lot of people don't know that, but your intestinal health, your gut health, is intimately linked to your immune health. And because my gut health was very damaged, very poor at the time, it eventually caused my immune system to snap and go haywire. And I didn't know any of this. Like this was all news to me. But Mercy helped to educate me on all of these principles. And not only that, but Mercy was a Seventh Day Adventist, and I didn't know anything about Seventh Day Adventists. And I kind of heard, um, I kind of in my mind, I kind of jokingly thought of them as vegan Mormons. That's I didn't know anything, right? I just had like a kind of a vague pop culture idea of what Seventh Day Adventists were. That's kind of how I looked at them. And So she started to um, give me all this incredible information about how to eat and how to change my diet and how to fix myself, how to heal myself. And she was very adamant that I need to stop working out. And it was that was really hard for me because I had worked really hard to achieve like the body that I had and the strength that I had and like achieve like the athleticism that I had because I'm also a martial artist. And the body that I had developed was necessary to compete at the level I was competing at in martial arts. And so like that I couldn't let it go. But the so I tried to say, well, maybe I'll just eat more in line with the way she's telling me to, but I'll still work out. Well, yeah, that didn't happen. I had to go. There's some games that you don't get to play unless you're all in, right? And this was one of them. So I had to go all in, and so I went all in, and I fasted for like 4 days, and then I started adopting this vegan, gluten free, plant based diet. Stopped working out. Very hard for me. That was such a big decision for me, but it felt like I was dying. These attacks were really serious. They were keeping me up at night. I couldn't go to sleep. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with these horrible attacks, like an elephant was sitting on my chest. So I was like, no, I got to do it. I've got to give it up. And so I stopped working out and I started eating this way. And in a matter of like a month and a half, like I was better. I was better. And I started talking. I realized that Mercy she had these businesses, right? She has like Wholeness Market and Years Restored because she heals people, right? She has a retreat in Northern California where she has a 10-day detox class where she helps people recover from the most out of this world, like crazy illnesses, lupus and cancer and multiple sclerosis and all these diseases. And she helps people legitimately recover from these things. And like I hadn't gone there myself, but just remotely, just getting access to the knowledge and doing it myself, like it worked, right? It worked, and I knew it was working for other people, and I was just so grateful. I was to this day, like I feel an intense debt of gratitude eternally for Mercy and how she helped me. And so I saw that she had these businesses, and she had an amazing product, right? And she had an amazing class, and she had this plant-based food she was selling online, and it was all fantastic, right? But she just had a problem getting it in front of people, right? The marketing, the actual business behind it. And I just happened to be studying marketing, and I just so happened to be studying business at the time. And so I started giving her suggestions of things she should do. And then we started to all of a sudden, next thing you know, we form a business relationship. And to this day, I do marketing for her businesses. And through this, we started talking and developing a relationship more and more. And then that's when I met, Dr. Joyce Chet, who's a close family friend and business partner. And they're all very devout Seventh-day Adventists. And they started talking to me about because they knew I was really into. They knew by this point I'm consider myself a Christian. I'm a Christian, and they know I'm a Christian, and they know I believe in the Bible, but I'm not a Seventh-day Adventist. And so ever since I met them, they've really encouraged me to start studying Scripture more and giving me their Seventh-day Adventist perspectives on the Bible and introducing me to the teachings of Ellen White. And they've given me copies of the Great Controversy and Prophets and Patriarchs and all of these fantastic texts. And it's only deepened my understanding of the Bible, of everything that is, and deepen my connection with God. And ever since to this day, I still consider my mentorship. I'm continuing my mentorship with them, and we do Bible studies every week. And every week that passes, my knowledge of the Bible grows, and my ability to communicate these biblical teachings to other people grows. And people in my life who had always considered themselves either atheist or New Age people are starting to become a lot warmer to the idea of Christ and Christianity in the Bible because they see the change it's had in me, and they can hear the profundity when I talk about it and the passion that I speak about it with, and they know that I've wrestled with these things all my life, and so I don't take these things lightly. And I've noticed that it's not only is it happening in me? Is my connection growing? But the people around, it's starting to enact change in the people around me. And so I consider it a great blessing to be where I'm at. I've never felt more fulfilled in my life. I feel like I have a clear direction for myself. I feel like God has a plan for me, and I I couldn't be more grateful to be where I'm at. So that's my story.